This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. Question 244 out of 333 questions of Arthur J. Stansbury's Catechism and the Constitution of the United States. Question answer. That's what a catechism is. Question 244. Does not every officer receive money for doing the duties of his office? Answer. Yes. Every officer in the general government in Washington, D.C. gets paid for what they do. The law allows him, says the answer, Alfred J. Stansbury. The law allows him a certain sum. But a bribe is something more than this, given him not by the United States, but by somebody who wishes him to favor them in the exercise of his power as a public officer. It is wicked. It is wicked to offer a bribe. It is still worse to accept one. It would be useful here to define what bribery is at common law, because that's what our Constitution forbids, or our common law forbids. Our Constitution, as short and brief as it is, it freights with every word and every phrase trainloads of common law history. And we know how to interpret it, because how to understand it, how to apply it, because it is a brief of common law government. Common law is applied to those in government. What is a bribe? It's against the law, of course. A bribe is giving a favor of some kind, money, an advantage, inside information to somebody in government for a favor back. Now, this covers a lot of stuff. I first want to say what a bribe is not, and I want to tell a story to demonstrate what a bribe is not. We had a fellow at home, went to school with his daughters. Sweet as a peach, the girl was. Still is, as far as I know. Her name was Betsy. Her father, down from our neck of the woods, down there toward Moonshine. And my mother says she remembers him going to pick up his wife, Betsy's mother, barefoot. People didn't used to wear shoes in the summertime because they couldn't afford. They save your shoes for winter. Don't wear them out in the summer. That's dumb. And she remembers him driving up in the car. I won't say her name. People figure out who all these people are, but I said one of the names. But her mother and father, their family ran the store right beside where I went to church. There was a church, a store, and a schoolhouse there. And they ran that little country store. And he'd come there, pull up in his old car, this is before World War II, jump out and go inside to get her, to take her to town and go on a date, barefoot. Well, by the time I was coming along and his daughter and I were in high school together, he was worth over $90 million. Over $90 million. You never know it looking at him. He never dressed fancy, wore bib overalls, drove an old beat up pickup truck, and lived in a farm. I used to put up hay in his barn after he was worth that much money. You couldn't tell the difference. Kept a few head of cattle. Well, what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you the story. And I'm going to try to make a point about what a bribe is not. The largest above ground oil reserve in the world was just north of where I grew up, 6 or 7 miles. It was the target. It was what Adolf Hitler wanted more than anything in the world, was that above ground reserve, because there would have been enough oil there to run his war machine forever. And there had pipelines running to it from all over the oil fields, all over from Wyoming and Michigan and Louisiana and Texas and Oklahoma, and right locally too. Well, they also had, that was called the pipeline division, but they also, the company was Marathon Oil Company. They had the production division. That means they drilled oil wells. Well, this fellow was father to this gal I went to school with. get into oil business. He recognized there's money in the oil business, and he believed there was a lot of that black gold down there in the ground that he could get at. Well, he had to get in the circles. Well, the production division there, it was called the Ohio Oil Company because that's where they started. They came from Pennsylvania. Titusville's where the oil business started in America, and then Pennsylvania, and then a little bit into Michigan, then down into our neck of the woods, southern Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky, and then on into Oklahoma. And by the 1930s, they were in Texas. But around where I lived, by 1900, they had started drilling for oil. He wanted to get a piece of it after World War II. So he went into the production division, didn't have anything. I suppose he put on a pair of shoes and a nice shirt because he wanted the contract to drill well for this large major oil company. He was competing for the contract. He had an old beat up drilling rig he'd gotten somewhere and tried to put together. He heard that they were looking for a driller, so he went in, made an appointment for an interview. The guy interviewed him, just a young fella. I mean, the guy that was my father to this girl I went to school with. And when he got done with the interview, he stood up and he reached in his front shirt pocket and he pulled out 4 $100 bills. Now multiply that by at least 10. That'd be $4,000, maybe 20 actually. That'd be like $8,000 today in today's money. He unfolded it and he laid it on the desk and put his hand on it and he said to the fellow that interviewed him, "I appreciate your time." And that was the only money he had in the world. I don't know where he got it. He used to tell the story. Well, he got the drilling job because he tipped the fellow $400, worth about probably between $4,000 and $8,000. He put it all on the line. He wanted that drilling job, and he proved to that man he wanted it enough to. Well, that's the oil business. That's the mining business. It's rough and tumble. A lot of money changes hands for a lot of different reasons. Everybody gets a kickback. That's the way the business runs. It's always run that way. Is that bribery? Did he bribe that fella? Of course, that's how he got into drilling. And every time this fella had a nose, he stayed at home. He didn't have a geology degree, but he had a nose for oil. That's what we'd say at home. That man's got a nose for oil. There's another fellow from home there, became the richest man in the world. His name was Hunt. He's from right there close by. He ended up full homestead, and he left the home. He never went to school. I think he went to the 3rd grade around a place called Ramsey. Coal mining town there. Ramsey. Went to the 3rd grade, but he went to Arkansas, didn't have as he used to say, didn't have a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out of. Didn't have either one. He went down to Arkansas to homestead. That didn't work out. Ran into a fellow on the Texas border down there talking about drilling oil. This is in the 1930s, and they somehow got an old rig together and poked a hole in the ground. The oil came out in a gusher. And every time he poked a hole in the ground, it happened again. Pretty soon, it wasn't many years, he became the wealthiest man in the country. His name was Hunt. His boys are the ones that tried to corner the silver market here a few decades ago. The world silver market, and they had the money to do it. Oh, a lot of things. Oh, American history. All the little things, though, well, they appear little. You don't hear about stuff like this. He got the oil business going down there in Texas, then up into Oklahoma. Baptist, belonged to the First Baptist Church, Dallas, Texas. He's the one that's responsible for running a young fellow U.S. Senate against LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who later became president. The 501c3 arose because of what he did. But let me get back to the story. This fellow at home, $90 million, he started poking holes in the ground. The oil started gushing out. He did drilling oil in West Kentucky, southern Indiana, and Illinois mostly. Did he bribe that fellow when he gave him that $400 or equivalent to $8,000? The answer is no. It wasn't a crime. He could have never been lawfully prosecuted for it. Why? Because that fellow he gave that money to was not a government official. That's why. Was not a government official. But Let's change the story a little bit and see if it was a bribe. Maybe it was a bribe if we add this to the story, this fact to the story. It was a private matter, had nothing to do with government. But, and this is where the danger could come in, if that company was a corporation, a creature of state government, signed off by the Secretary of State in exchange for the limited liability of the shareholders, that's what corporate life is, then that money that he gave to that interviewer could have been characterized as a bribe. Why? Because the corporation is a creature of government. You bribe a corporate officer, that becomes a little more iffy. I'm not an expert in that area of law, but I do know that corporations are under the control of government. Oh, yeah. They sure are. But the bottom line is, in the private sector, doing that kind of thing is not bribery. But you do that to someone who is a government official, and that's a high crime. If he accepts it, it's a high crime. That's bribery. Bribery, as a bottom line, the bottom line definition is bribery only applies to money you give to a government official, anywhere, anything from an elected official, congressman, state senator, governor, president, to a bureaucrat that works for one of those three branches of government. It's not allowed. It's a crime. Well, that's what he's saying here. The President of the United States, the Congressman, it's wicked. 245, can there be no bribery but by means of money? Is money the only way to bribe a government official? Answer, yes. Bribes may be offered in various shapes. Any benefit or advantage offered to any officer for an improper end, unlawful end, is bribery. I was traveling with a state legislator in Alaska. This legislator was in the Alaska legislature down in the state capital at Juneau in the Panhandle down there along the coast of Alaska. Did you know the only way to get from the mainland of Alaska down into the Panhandle is by airplane or ferry? You can't get from Alaska proper up there, the massive mass of Alaska's land, down to the state capital. There's only two ways, airplane or ferry. You can't drive. And they're ticked about it too. And of course, the people in office, the governor and the state legislators, and all, they want that separation so people can't get at them. It's kind of funny. Now, I was traveling with this state legislator. We were making presentations about outcome-based education, which was the big rage during the days of Obama bin Saladin, or whatever his name was. And that's just the Islamic fellow that was in office. Remember him? That's madness. You're going to tell me that fellow, Americans elected an Islamic Arab, and that's what he was. To office, I don't believe it. To the presidency, I don't believe it. Shenanigans going on there. It took us another election or two to figure it out. Well, at any rate, we were traveling around the state, and we went to somebody's house who was letting us stay at their house because they supported what they were doing. I remember very well. They got up the next morning and they served us a nice breakfast, and on it went. But this state legislator said, I'm not going to stay here for nothing. I'm going to write you a check for $50 for letting me stay here. Why? Because I can't accept bribes. See, and that's what the law in Texas or in Alaska is pretty tight on that one. If you accept any favor, any benefit from anybody as a state legislator to promote, while you're promoting, to help you promote a political point of view, something you're trying to do as a legislature, it's a bribe. It doesn't have to be money. Letting a legislator or a governor stay at your house while he travels and campaigns in Alaska, that's a bribe. Well, that's a bribe really anywhere. Favors. I had a client once that used to say, look, man, we're doing great in this case. I've got a timeshare at a big ski resort up in the Sierra Nevadas, not down at the bottom of the ski resorts everybody goes to, but up at the top, up there around Tahoe. and I'm not using it right now. I want you to go there and spend a week. Relax. You can have all you want to eat. You can go ice skating. You can just do nothing. I used to go to those and just do nothing. I'd sit around in the evening around the fire and watch people ice skate out on an ice skating ring there. Nice place. I think the name of the place was North Star. North Star. Is there anything wrong with him doing that? No, no, that's just a favor. I'm not a government, I wasn't a government official. But if he'd have been a government, or if I'd have been a government official, yeah, there's something wrong with that. Question 246. 246. What do you understand the word court to mean? What do you understand the word court to mean? What is it? Answer. A place where a judge sits to hear and determine causes according to law. A place where a judge sits to hear and determine causes according to law. I'm going to take issue with Arthur J. Stansbury here. I don't believe that's the best definition of court. It certainly is part of the definition, but that's not the definition. The court is not a place only. The court is the judge or the jury, depending upon who's making the decision. Is it a place? Yes, it is a place where they exercise their jurisdiction. So it's both. So he says something that's true here, but I want to add it is the persons that have discretion within their scope of authority to make those decisions about this particular case, either the judge or the jury, or you take them both together because the judge is part of the court. You say, well, the jury is not the court. The jury is a separate branch. In one way, yes. In one way, yes. I don't argue with you. The jury is not part of the government. But the judge isn't supposed to be either, but he is. Like Justice Scalia used to say, people would write to him and say, what's the matter with you guys up there? You're supposed to represent us. You folk you judges on the Supreme Court, you justices are supposed to represent us American people. And he said publicly, are you insane? Are you that stupid? We're supposed to represent you? No. You got representatives in the legislative branch of government. Number one, we're not representatives. You didn't elect us. Number two, most of America, says Justice Scalia, has always been and is still Protestant. There are no Protestants on the Supreme Court. They're almost all Roman Catholics, that's law of the city, and a couple of Jews. Is that a representation of America? Answer, he says, I'm quoting him, no. That's not our job here, is to represent people. Our job here is to discern the application of the law, and specifically as justices of the Supreme Court, the application of the Constitution of the United States. That's our jurisdiction. Now, I think it would be better that we have a more crosscut of American people, and there were Protestants on the court. There haven't been for a long time. Does that tell you something? No, Roman men and women now that were trained in Jesuit schools dominate the federal courts. Not always, the lower courts, but have dominated the Supreme Court along with Jewish appointments and the lower courts. Now, on the state level, that's not true, more local. U.S. attorneys dominated, have been Romanist. I find it fascinating. In a lot of ways, I won't talk about it more here, but yeah, there's a disproportionate amount of that. Why is that? Justice Scalia was an honest man on a lot of points, and he made that point. And he appreciated, by the way, he appreciated the Protestants very much, especially the Presbyterians in Canada and America. Why? Because the Presbyterians preach they're Bible-believing Presbyterians. They preach a hot gospel. They preach it hot, delivered up hot. And also, they have always been and continue to be, if they're Bible-believing, interested in government. Now, if you listened to me very long, you probably concluded that I tend to favor the Presbyterians. That's true. I tend to favor the Presbyterians as a Protestant group. There are others that preach a hot gospel too, but I favor the Presbyterians because I find more in common with them and always have. And their confession, their Westminster Confession and their Westminster Catechism, I favor it and I'm more familiar with it. The Dutch have what they call there is the Belgic Confession, the London Baptist Confession, which follows substantially the Westminster Confession, the London Baptist Confession. The 39 articles of the Anglican Church follow the Westminster Confession. The Puritans followed the Westminster Confession later, yes, and the Presbyterians, they were part of putting that together. So Presbyterians and the Puritans are fundamentally, biblically the same in their doctrines. But I favor the Presbyterians, and the reason is this: the Puritans early on were extremely interested. They were focused on government. The Puritans focused on the law of contracts, the law of promises. Of the 10 commandments, that has to do with thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not lie. Well, not lying is equal to keeping your promises. See, that's the law of contracts. And the Presbyterians focused on the second commandment. The Puritans focused on the 9th, thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. That's lying, not keeping your promises. And the Presbyterians, they focused on the second commandment, thou shalt make unto me no graven images. Both of them are indispensable, of course, or all 10 are indispensable, but this thing about graven images has gotten plumb out of hand. On what point? Well, many points. There is a resurgence in America, it's a sad thing, of idolatry in the form of images, that's 3-dimensional images, statues, and icons, that's 2-dimensional images, pictures, and frescoes and paintings. The Eastern Orthodox Church focuses on icons, 2-dimensional images, paintings, frescoes, or even photographs. The Western Church has both. They both have both, but the Western Church stresses images, 3-dimensional statues, idols. It destroys creativity. The Bible forbids it conclusively, without question. And they that worship them shall be like to them. You want to bow down to something like that, you'll end up like that. That's what Jeremiah says in the Bible. You bow down to an idol or an icon and pray before it. Well, I'm not praying for that. I'm praying to the true God using that as a visual aid. Well, that's exactly what idolatry is. And if you do that, the Bible says you will be like that which you bow down to and in front of. You'll become like that thing. I don't have to be able to explain it. I can't. I just know it's true. I've got ideas why it's true, of course. Oh yeah, strong ones, biblically. But it's true. You want to be without a brain, without sight, without hearing, without being able to speak, just bow down to an icon, do it consistently, and you'll be as dumb and deaf as blind as that thing. You think I'm kidding, and you will not be creative in your mind. And God doesn't want that. He didn't want you to substitute images, what you see with your eyes, with the important thing, what you hear with your ears. Faith comes by hearing. Hearing by the word of God. I'm quoting the Bible. Yeah. Don't get caught up in that. Oh, so many stories to tell and things to say about it. Talking about the Puritans, I do favor the Puritans aren't around anymore. They've done gone to seed, and most of their descendants, and there are a lot of them, are nothing but pagans. New England just was like California, it's just paganism. They've forgotten it all. And so that's been relegated to the hinterlands of America, where Protestantism. What is Protestantism? Well, that's an unhappy name. They're just folk that follow. They really believe the Bible to be true, and they believe that God is true, and he speaks through his word, the laws of nature, and the laws of nature is God. That's what they believe. Are courts necessary? Yeah, they are. Certainly, wherever laws are made, there must be some way of determining when they have been disobeyed and of causing those who disobey them to be punished. This is the use of a court and of a judge. Now he is distinguishing, see here, the court, the place, from those that sit in the place and make judgment. So I'm not quarreling with him a lot. I just say a court, the way that our courts and our common law uses the term court, is both the place and the people that make the decision, the people that have discernment to make those decisions within that scope of authority, which means the case before the court. When one person believes that another person has broken the laws to his injury or to the injury of the public, he may cause that person to appear before a judge and have it determined by witnesses. That's evidence, whether he has broken the laws or not. And if he has, he is forced, if the jury or the judge, depending upon whether it's a bench trial or a jury trial, and that can be at the choice of the person tried, he is forced to suffer such a punishment as the law directs. I was tried for conspiracy against the United States. It was a 6-week trial, 6-week trial. The court, after 6 weeks of hearing evidence, the jury said not guilty. Can you believe it? I say conspiracy against the United States. Well, who do they hate in this country? Who does the evil empire hate? They hate people who love the land. Oh, they don't mind the people that sing silly songs about loving the way America feels. America's a back porch swing and a diamond ring when you ask a woman to get married, and hot dogs and hamburgers. That's America. No, friends, that's what happens in America, and I love it too. But America, patriotism is love of the land, not the people here, the land the Lord your God has given you. I'm a patriot. And the useful idiots of the evil empire hate that concept. They hate it. That's why they just say, there is no land. We'll just open the borders and it's just all the same. Let people come in. So I ran for Congress. They indicted me with a grand jury and tried me for conspiracy against the United States. Some of you heard me talk about that. But the jury sprung me. They said, no, he's not guilty of conspiracy against the United States. It was touch and go. I was facing a lot of years in prison. But of course, I'm a proponent, as stupid as jurors are, they're just as stupid as the rest of us, and we're just as stupid as they are, but all the mistakes they make. I remember before court, I had a lawyer. Well, I did all my pre-trial litigation myself, but then I was trying to save up enough money to have a lawyer. As it turned out, I was able to. They took all my money. They took my ability to make a living. They separated me from my family. They tried to take my children from me. On. I had a pile of children. They tried to take them all. Went on and on and on. Tried to get my wife to turn against me, Mrs. Brent. She didn't, to her credit. Neither did my children. Even when they were little, they wouldn't talk to the government. Wouldn't. They tried to get them aside, talk to them, accuse me of everything from pedophilia to conspiring with them and my wife. On the madness goes. But they sprung me. Why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because it's important to recognize the importance of the jury. Does the jury always get it right? No, but at least in America, we got a shot at trying to get the jury to get it right, and sometimes they do. You don't even have a jury in the rest of the world, my friends, because they're not common law jurisdictions. They're law of the city jurisdictions. In the beginning of this presentation with Montana Dan, we were talking about the danger of the folk fleeing the city to the hinterlands of America. I'm glad they're getting out of the city, but here's the problem. If there is one, there is one. They take the mindset of the city with them. That's the law of the city, as opposed to our common law of the land, the canon civil laws of the city versus the law of the land. One is tyranny, administrative law, martial law, admiralty law, all just different labels for the law of the city. It's a martial kind of a law. And then there is our common law tradition, the law of the land. Well, this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com.